Thank you, Jude. The first don't of public speaking and delivery is to don't read or memorize your speech. Aristotle once said that one of the most important components of establishing credibility, and one of your most important components of speech, is to make it an audience-centered approach. And when you're reading or trying to memorize your speech, you're just looking at your paper and you're not grasping the audience with your eye contact. And you really want to bring the audience into your speech because your speech is supposed to be audience-centered and your audience is the most important part of doing it. And so by having that eye contact, which is said earlier by Jude, we're well on your way to doing that. Your second don't of public speaking is to don't tap, fidget, or fiddle with a pen. The reason for this, it is extremely distracting as an audience to keep tapping, to keep fidgeting, because it takes away from your words. They're just focusing on what you're doing with their hands and not what you're saying with their mouth. And as you work so hard on your speech, for this delivery to work out, they need to be listening to your words. And if you tap or fidget, it's only taking away from it. The third don't of public speaking is to don't lean on the podium. And in public speaking, you need to establish your credibility. And in order to establish your credibility, you need to have that nice, straight posture. If you're leaning on a podium, it kind of takes away from that posture and takes away from your credibility. You look a little bit weaker. And so now, in order to illustrate how effective this point is, now let us give it to Brad.
So we have now uncovered the secret of hazardous hotel rooms, examined the causes, and become reassured by solutions.
The fourth don't of public speaking is to don't shift your weight back from foot to foot. I know that Jude said earlier that you need to move around in your speech, but shifting your weight back and forth is very, very distracting towards the audience. You need to have those deliberate motions and moving around deliberately so it emphasizes points, as Jude stated earlier. If you keep shifting back and forth, your audience is just going to keep focusing on how you're swaying and not the words that you worked so hard to actually come up with. The fifth don't of public speaking is to don't chew gum. There's two main reasons why we should not chew gum. Number one, it is extremely unprofessional to chew gum during a speech. And a speech is supposed to be a little bit more formal than a regular conversation. So you need to have a little bit more of a professional demeanor while speaking. And chewing gum really takes away from that professional demeanor and in turn actually takes away from your credibility. The second reason why chewing gum is a big don't of delivery is that it is extremely hard to enunciate your words with that gum in your mouth. Gum is something that's extremely sticky and it kind of gets in the way of your ability for your muscles in your mouth to actually move up and down, and also for your tongue to help emphasize the words that you're saying. So it'll be actually harder in turn for your audience to understand what they're saying, which greatly takes away from your speech. Now let's look at the sixth don't of public speaking, which is don't turn your back to the audience by writing on a chalkboard or looking at your visual aid. And the reason for this is, number one, it is extremely unprofessional, and number two, if you're looking back, the sound waves that you are producing is actually going towards your visual aid and not your audience, when actually you should be speaking towards your audience. So in turn, it actually makes it a lot harder for your audience to hear what you're saying, and it takes away from your speech, because if your audience is not hearing what you're saying, they're less likely to try and actually listen. So now, this brings up the seventh don't of public speaking, which is don't tell us that you're scared, or nervous, or apologize. And the reason for this is that it greatly weakens credibility in your public speech. And in order to have a speech where you're actually trying to persuade the audience or inform them about a topic that's going on, your credibility is actually an extremely important thing. Granted, we're all human, and all of us really do mess up from time to time. But when that happens, you need to remember that one, the audience is extremely forgiving. And if you do mess up a little bit, just take a little bit pause and just keep going. And also you have to remember that the audience doesn't have their speech in front of you. So a lot of times if you mess up on your words or don't say it exactly correct, they probably will not know unless if you point it out. So if you just keep going and saying that speech that you worked so hard on, they'll forgive it and you'll have still a great speech. Now let's go on to the eighth don't of public speaking, which is don't use verbal fillers. Verbal fillers include like and. And for many public speakers, regardless of how novice or how long they have been speaking, this is one of the hardest things. This is one of the hardest don'ts to avoid. And the reason for this, especially with many ESL students, is that they feel that the like and is something that they can really fall back on. And on top of that, a lot of people feel that a pause is extremely awkward when you're up here while you're speaking. And the reason for this is that when you're up speaking, your adrenaline's really going. So things are actually happening faster than what the audience is actually seeing. So for your 1 second pause, an actual 1 second pause may seem like an eternity to the speaker. But in turn, it's actually just a 1 second pause. And these pauses are actually extremely effective in emphasizing really important points. So now to illustrate what this don't looks like when you're giving a speech, now let's give it to Safia.
So we've looked at the possible problems of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and we've discussed possible causes for the emergence of these superbugs.
The ninth don't of public speaking is don't think that reading a speech is practicing. Practicing a speech is a lot like practicing for sports. When you see a lot of athletes practice, they practice in the full attire, they go out and then they work hard, just as it's going to be in a game. It's a very good simulation for what's going to happen in the game. And so in order for you to get ready for a speech, you need to simulate what's going to happen when you're actually up in your class or up in that public setting giving a speech. So in turn, when you're actually practicing, stand up, use that good posture that we're talking about. Try to practice that eye contact. And in turn, this actually takes away some of that butterflies that occur right before having a speech. Because you will go up there and be like, hey, I've done this before. I've said this speech plenty of times. I've really worked hard on it, and I know I can do good. There's just a couple more people in front of me, but you know what? More people enjoy my speech. So, in turn, if you keep practicing, that actually takes away some of that nervous energy that you're having, and in turn, you can still have that amazing speech. Now, the final don't of public speaking is different from interpersonal communication that's a lot more face-to-face, like what's happening with their friends. Public speaking is actually a lot more formal. And in turn, with a more formal setting, you need to follow a lot of those don'ts, standing up straight, don't chew gum, have that very good eye contact, have that very good posture. So in turn, by following these do's and avoiding the don'ts that a lot of us have said so far, while public speaking is an extremely difficult thing to do, just by following these do's and don'ts, you're well on your way to having an amazing speech.